So my advice to anyone starting out is, like I said, learn your craft and own your career path. No one is going to own it for you. No one is going to give you an embossed invitation on your career. You have to take your career by the horns and go with it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh McKenzie, and welcome to Graduate Edge. How often have you heard that career success often means moving, switching companies, changing roles, pursuing new positions, and making sure that you're always hungry for the next thing? What if I told you that one of the most remarkable career journeys I've ever encountered happens within the four walls of a single company over 26 years? Our guest in this episode is Katie Rigg-Smith, who started as an intern at Mindshare and went on to become the youngest CEO and the first woman to ever hold that role. Katie didn't get there with a career plan, though, or by playing some calculated long game, or by networking her way to the top. She got there by doing something that sounds almost too simple, embarrassingly simple, being excellent at whatever role she was in at the time. That's it. Our conversation, I think, was refreshingly honest about this and also some of the messy parts, like the moment a few years in where she nearly burned out and had to learn the hard way that setting boundaries wasn't optional. The realization that just doing your job isn't actually enough if you want to grow. And the tough truth about balancing a demanding career with starting a family. Spoiler alert, there's no perfect time, but it is possible. And I know some of you will be thinking about, can I have a career and a family as well? Katie talks through also the wake-up call from a friend that changed how she approached her workload, and that sometimes the best career move is to stay right where you are rather than constantly looking for the next thing. So whether you're figuring out your first role, thinking about what's next, wondering if you should jump ship for the next opportunity, Katie offers a different perspective, one that's both ambitious and sustainable. So settle in. This is a conversation about realizing you've been playing the long game the whole time without losing yourself along the way. Welcome to Graduate Edge. So you loved painting, photography, English, history at school. Did that influence you to go into media?
Absolutely not, actually, ironically enough. Um, Actually influenced me to go into advertising. So I initially had in my head that I would do graphic design or advertising or creative. And I said about that in my university and my pathway. And then sort of media happened to be a subject I loved. And my media lecturer at the time was like, you need to be media. And then I did a lot of work experience in different parts of businesses and found out that media was something I really loved and had a really innate ability for it. So ended up in the media part of it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So you studied communication and media at university and found yourself in the professional world at a company called Mindshare as an intern. I'm interested
Yep.
to hear, once you got into the professional world, what surprised you, what was different, what was unexpected in the sort of professional environment in media.
It wasn't so much surprising as more just having to adapt to that working world. And I think that's why it was really important that I'd done so much work experience. So I went in knowing kind of eyes wide open as to what it would be like, but then you adapt to that day in, day out, and the fact that this is the career that you've chosen. So I think it was more just adapting to that as my new normal. And probably was surprising was just how much energy was put into culture in the best possible way, like just how much they really rally behind your cultural experience and having fun and enjoying your work, not just being there to do a job.
And so your previous work experiences in that kind of field no doubt made that transition much more smoothly. Thinking about young professionals today and putting yourself back in those shoes, have you reflected on whether you would take that path again into media? Or is there value in getting work experience in other fields and doing different internships in maybe even different industries, and then finding yourself in something that you might.
Absolutely. I think for me, I did do the work experience I did was actually a lot of it was outside of media. So it was in the creative side, it was in the graphic design side, it was in the production side. And so I did different areas
Gotcha.
of the communication industry, public relations, everything. And I did that across 3 years. I tried to get as many opportunities to go in and work at places for those internships. So I definitely think getting a broad depth. And then when you do know, I mean, I knew I loved the industry. I knew it was what I wanted to do. And so knowing that made it easier to step into it.
And so then you find yourself in the media world, in that sort of professional environment. Tell me about something that you found hard in those first year or two.
Wasn't hard. It was more just understanding how you can career path and what are the opportunities and how do you make sure that you are taking all the opportunities that you can get. I think it's always interesting early on understanding how do you approach pay rises and how do you approach your KPIs and things like that. So I think that's all of a learning curve, but actually wasn't necessarily hard. I mean, I loved what I was doing and I really loved the people I was working with.
Yeah, and what an enormous difference that must have made. Finding yourself so early in your career in a space that you
Yeah.
loved and were therefore sort of flourishing and maybe excelling in, which I guess is a natural lens into eventually staying at that company for quite some time. But before we dive too much into that, I read a quote from you somewhere. You said you think your career has been untraditionally traditional, which I loved. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that back in the day, our parents and our grandparents, it was very clear you went into one career and you stayed in it. You worked your way up and that was it. You stayed with one company or you stayed in one field. And that's not common nowadays. And so for me to stay 26 years with a company and to see a lot of my career path through it's traditional, but it's untraditional now.
It's untraditional. It's untraditional these days for sure. There must have been moments though, either early on in your career, although you say you were loving it, so maybe not, but it would be early on in your career, or I mean, surely by the fifth year, the sixth year, the seventh year, did it ever cross your mind to leave, to go and do something else? What was your mentality around it?
100%. There were many moments, and they would usually be because the industry is one that's headhunted quite regularly. So I would regularly have people throwing great job opportunities at me. And so there was always, being enticed and seduced by other agencies, which were also wonderful agencies. And there were moments where I was burnt out. I had one moment that I came the closest to resigning. It was probably about 8 years in, and I was working all hours. I mean, I was working until the early hours of the morning and I was getting a couple of hours sleep and I was going back in. And I remember one of my friends really didn't like where I worked because of it. She was like, "You are the shell of a person. You are burning out." And so I finally decided I had enough. And so I called her and I said, "I'm going to resign tomorrow." And she very bluntly over the phone said, "Is it you or is it Mindshare?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Is it you or is it Mindshare? Are you going to be any different if you go somewhere else?" And I hung up on her. No, I didn't. But she was right. And so I sort of stopped and went, yeah. And so I went into work the next day and I took my managing director aside and I said, "Look, I am at breaking point. I can't do this anymore. And here are the things I need to change." And she was like, "Done. We don't want to lose you for anything." And then I thought, if I do all of these things and they do all of these things and it's still not good, then I'll leave. But sure enough, I had a lot to do with that, saying yes to everything, not giving boundaries, all of those things I had to take on board and make some changes around. And then I managed to stay another, 12 years or whatever beyond that. It definitely was me. And I watched other friends who leave different agencies and actually their behaviors follow them to the next agency and they get burnt out after a couple of years. So my friend's point was very valid.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because a lot of the advice you get early on in your career is say yes to everything, put your hand up,
Yeah.
get involved,
Yeah.
don't turn anything down. With the benefit of hindsight now and some experience to reflect on, what's your perspective on saying yes to everything early in your career? How do you reconcile saying yes to everything, getting involved as much as you can, and giving everything 100% with well-being and looking after yourself, health? What's your reflection now, looking back?
I wouldn't change it, and I actually do think the advice is valid to people coming out. Say yes to things, put your hand up, volunteer, be part of it, but I think it has to be within reason. And at the time, I was doing two people's jobs, and it just wasn't within reason anymore. And I think where I fell down was I didn't put my hand up early enough to say, I am drowning in work. I was just hoping people would notice it. Instead, I should have been like, I'm happy to do this and I'm really happy. It's a great opportunity for me to take this other person's role and start stepping into it. You got to find someone to do the work that I was currently doing. And I just didn't say anything. So they didn't know how bad it was. So I would say yes to everything, but then understand as you say yes to everything, what are your boundaries around that? And how long can you say yes to that? Like, is it an opportunity to do something for 3 weeks? Brilliant. And you're like, I'm going to sacrifice a few, well, maybe a weekend or two because I just want this opportunity and it's okay because it's this one moment in time. Or is it a really long moment in time, which is not good for your health and you're no use? I learned that I was trying so hard to do my job, I stopped being good at my job. Like you've got to get out and live life in order to be
Wow.
good at your job. You've got to have balance. You've got to have health and well-being and friends around you to be able to do a good job. So just doing your job actually isn't the answer. So that was a big learning for me.
Yeah, there's a big difference between doing your job and doing your job well in a way that adds value, that your manager appreciates, that the business appreciates. That's what's
Yeah.
going to get you feeling great and more career opportunities and open doors and build a great reputation for you. Just doing your job
Yeah.
and potentially not doing it as well, but getting it done
Yeah.
is not really what any manager wants of you early in your career, right?
No. And I mean, they, particularly in my field where it's all about curiosity and understanding how people behave and how they engage with brands and culture and trends. If you say to a client, they're like, what have you done on the weekend? You're like, I worked. No client wants to hear that. They want to hear that you went to an art gallery or to the movies or you did something with your life because no one can be able to observe the world around them if they're literally just sitting in a room working. So they don't even want that from you. And being able to work
Yeah.
smarter, not hard, is a really important thing.
I'm interested in your perspective that you might give to young professionals. You ended up staying at Mindshare for 26 years, and we'll explore your sort of lessons and advice and stories that fall out of that in a minute. A lot of advice these days, you talked about untraditionally traditional, is you'll have lots of different roles in lots of different companies over potentially many decades. With your perspective now, would you advocate a long game with one employer versus a series of short games with a handful of employers? What are your thoughts about that now?
I think, look, I ended up CEO and the youngest CEO. I think because I played a long game with one employer who knew me so well and took a chance on me. That said, whilst I was with one employer, I was actually doing many, many different roles. So if you'd have asked me at the time, I was like, I probably had about 5 different careers because within that employer, I was doing different parts. I was doing buying, I was doing client leadership, I was doing strategy, I was following different areas. And I was able to say to them as I planned out my career, I want to try strategy. And like, okay, we'll make that happen. Here's a year-long path to get you into strategy. So I feel like I was able to do different careers within that one environment. And they knew my strengths, they knew my weaknesses, and they were willing to take chances on me, even when I wasn't willing to take a chance on me. That said, I think that I have never thought too much about the long game. I've actually only ever thought about the short game in front of me, which is something most people would not think about me. They're like, you ended up CEO. You must have known you were on that career path. I'm like, no, I actually never had that as I'm going to be a CEO one day. All I focused on was I got this new role. Here's the JD. I want to learn my craft and I want to be amazing at this job. When I'm amazing at this particular job, I will look up again and I'll figure out what opportunities that has opened for me. And then I'll figure out the next step. I was actually just interested in what I was good at. And I had goals every time. Like, so I got into the strategy team. That had been a goal. Then I wanted to be a strategic director. Then I eventually wanted to be a chief strategy officer. And so they were all goals as I went through, but I was never single-minded to a point that I had blinkers onto opportunities. I had friends that came out of uni and they're like, I'm going to be a CEO. That's all I want to be. I'm like, do you even know what a CEO does? And then they their career is so single-minded on this one thing. And I think they miss all these other opportunities and they don't even necessarily get there. So I just think for me, it was less about the title and always about the work that I was doing and proving myself in that role. So when I was CEO, I had many staff. I had 250, 300 staff across Australia and New Zealand, amazing individuals. But you'd see the ones that would come into their new role and already be planning the next one. And that can be seen as ambitious, which is great, but not if they haven't actually proven their worth in the role they've got. You're like, stop being distracted by everything else around you. deliver in this role, and then we'll get you to the next one. And so for me, it was always about how do I prove that I am doing this brilliantly? And when I'm comfortable that I'm doing this role brilliantly, how do I then get the next thing?
Yeah, there's such great truth in that, in that the best way to open up your next door, best way to open up your next promotion, job, job change, opportunity, etc., is to be very, very good at what you're doing today. Make that the goal, right?
Yes.
What would you say then to the young professionals coming in? It is common for some young professionals to come in, be confident and ambitious. Not all young professionals are confident and ambitious. In fact, more young professionals these days are less confident, I think. But it is natural and common for some to come in and say, "Yeah, this is the industry I want to do, and this is the company I want to be CEO in 12 years, or MD in 8 years, or whatever it might be." And I think it's important that we don't dampen the
Oh God, no.
enthusiasm, but
I
instead channel it, right? So, what would you say to that group? I guess. How do you channel it? What are the mindsets, the skills? How would you approach it if it had have been your goal? Like what would you say to them?
I think there are two types, right? I think you have people like me who haven't got an end goal in mind, but know what they're passionate about and follow that type. Then you do have the ones that know exactly what they want to do, and they're both great. Neither's right or wrong. It depends on your personality skill, but everyone needs to have their KPIs set. And everyone needs to unpack the job role of the next job that they're going to do. And so that for me was always harnessing it. I had people say to me, I want to be CEO one day and I want to be the head of innovation or whatever. I'm like, that's brilliant. Here's the things you need to do and achieve in the next couple of years to get there. Like, if that's your ultimate goal, I love that for you. Here's what we need to help you do to get it. So, my advice to anyone starting out is, like I said, learn your craft and own your career path. No one is going to own it for you. No one is going to give you an embossed invitation on your career. You have to take your career by the horns and go with it. And I worked for companies with the best training programs. They had so much training for us. And it was still incumbent on me to go, you know what? This is what I want to achieve. So just make sure when you get into the working world that you don't think that someone's going to be there to guide your career. No, it's yours to own. You own it and you find the people to help you get there.
How did you find the people to get you to help you get there? Because you've built a wonderful reputation, and I've always got the sense we've known each other for a little while, and I've always got the sense that there have been some key relationships kind of throughout your career. How did you go about building those relationships over time?
I think that it's and this is I'm going to steal a quote. This was at South by Southwest, and I wish I could attribute it to the person who said it on stage now, but he was talking about interrelationships. And at the time I didn't know this is what I was doing, but he said the biggest job interrelationships in companies is to make friends before you need them and to make friends with people before you need them. And I think I just made friends with a lot of people and I was interested and I wanted to impress my bosses and I went out of my way to kind of be a part of the agency. And so when I was at a point where I'm like, can I get some advice on this? I think the best way is just asking people for advice or a chance to buy them a coffee. Or I was so blessed with the number of people that were invested in me, but because I also just wanted to get to know them before I needed them, before I needed to say, hey, can I get a coffee with you to ask your advice? I'd already built interpersonal skills with them. And I think that comes back to the importance of being in offices together, whether it's hybrid, half, like all of that's fine, but you don't get that opportunity if you're just working virtually. And so a big thing for me was I got that opportunity because I was with people and chatting to them.
Proactively, though, like I guess, getting back to your point about owning your career and taking responsibility, and no one's going to do it for you. You proactively made friends. Is your sort of frame for it, and built those relationships. Do you think young professionals have early on in their career almost like a pass? I was having a conversation with another guest recently. If you do it respectfully,
Yeah.
you can kind of ask to get involved in whatever you want, or go and find out what someone thinks about whatever, or go and learn what this person does. Do you think that
Yeah,
exists?
absolutely. And I think that you stand out. I remember like being CEO and being in all the leadership roles I've been in, it's the people like the juniors that would reach out to me and go like, can I help with a pitch? I know I'm not in the pitch team, but can I be in the room? Can I make coffees for everyone just so I can see the pitch? And they just stand out for you so much. And of course, they're the ones that they are might be helping. And I was that person. I was ordering pizzas for people because I desperately wanted to see what happened in a pitch room. And then, of course, I'm the one being picked in 2 years' time to be part of that pitch because, well, I'm top of mind. I'm someone they're thinking of. And so, yes, absolutely, you stand out as being someone that's interested and, interesting and being part of the company. So absolutely asking and using that time to establish that you want to be part of things, asking questions. And then I think, as you get more senior, it's paying it forward, paying it back. I mentor so many people. Anyone that reaches out, I sort of will have a chat with them and stuff because I believe in paying back all the people that helped me. So paying it back, paying it forward, and then, making sure that you can also look at reverse mentoring. So when I was CEO, we started doing things in channels like programmatic and things that I just never had to do when I was going through. And so I'd go to my programmatic team, I want some reverse mentoring. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to meet once a week and you're going to train me on your area and I'm going to come ready to ask questions. And they got a big kick out of that too, because the CEO's sitting there with them training, like being trained by them. But I think it goes, if you can start your career always being ready to learn, consistently learn no matter what, and you keep that mindset all the way up to the very top, you will be successful.
Just on mentoring, you've been mentored, and as you say, you've done a lot of mentors. I just want to pull this apart for a minute while we're talking about it. Did you sort of consciously, deliberately go about building a set of mentors or a mentor, or did that sort of come naturally through relationships that you had built?
Mine came more organically. There wasn't really at the time any programs when I was coming through within our industry that focused on it. It is now and it's really strong now, but I think mine was just organically and generally it came from my direct line manager and building a relationship with them and then them starting to mentor me or the manager above them. And then you kind of keep those people like John Steedman, who is the group chair and the CEO of Mindshare, and he's still a mentor to me. I mean, I caught up with him for lunch recently, and he still mentors me in some way, even though it's been 26 years, 27 years of it. So I think I just organically sort of collected people and they stay, like you still have relationships with them. So they're always giving you advice and helping.
Yeah, often a piece of career advice is find mentors, develop
Yeah.
mentors. If you're in your first year, 2, 3 years of your career, what are some things people can do, do you think?
I think honestly, everyone loves talking about themselves. Like if you ask someone to talk about themselves, they're like, sure. So my thing was always just have a coffee, reach out and go, look, I am so interested in what you do in the company. And I did do that a lot where I'd say to someone, I'm really, really keen to understand your area of the business. Can I buy you a coffee for 20 minutes and just ask you some questions and ask how you got where you are and all of those things? And no one ever said no to that. Everyone would be like, sure. And the thing is, when you do that, they're giving you of their time. Make sure you turn up prepared. I have had a couple of instances, not many out of the years. I've always had wonderful experience, but I have a couple where people will want my time and I'll give it. And then they'll kind of sit there staring at me. I'm like, you need to engage in this conversation and ask me, like, this isn't a tick box exercise. Like, you've got to turn up to extract whatever you need from me in this time period. And so I would always turn up prepared with the mentors and I'd send them questions ahead of time. And, these people might only be one rung higher than me or two rungs. Like it wasn't about going to the very top. In fact, I never really went to the top of the company knowingly like that. I went to people kind of contemporaries and said like, but always going to them here, these are kind of the questions I'd love to pick your brain about. And so they come prepared as well, but use their time wisely, ask them to talk about themselves, and you generally can build rapport and continue relationships like that.
Brilliant, brilliant advice. I'm also interested in your mentoring of particularly young professionals. What types of challenges, themes come up regularly,
Yeah.
in mentoring conversations with younger parts of the workforce?
Think there's often a frustration. You get to a certain year, and I mean, gosh, I remember it being about 4 or 5 years in and being frustrated. I'm like, my career doesn't feel like it's moving as fast as I want. I'm not being paid as much as I want. And so I do see that in that kind of 4 to 5 years where people are just a bit frustrated. And a lot of the time they're like, I can do my boss's job better than they can. So there can be that feeling of frustration. There can be the feeling of, am I being remunerated the way I need to be? And I don't quite know how to have those discussions. And then another theme tends to be around I'm ready to lead
Mhm.
people or I've just started leading people and a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I think that transition from being a kind of an independent worker who might have one person underneath you, but through to a point when you are leading teams of people and you're responsible for their output, their well-being, their happiness, their everything, the step change is really, really quite pronounced. And I think that's what a lot of people will reach out for mentoring on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that 4 to 5 year mark is a really, it's what we find, what we find as well. It's a really common turning point for people, actually. There's a sense of competence, capability.
Yes.
Often you've built a bit of a network, you've got a reputation, you've got more options than you had 4 years ago.
I had great advice from my brother once who was in finance, and I remember being so frustrated, and I called him. I'm like, "That's it. I wanna go into finance. You guys make money, da, da, da." And he was like, "Yeah, you could do it, Katie, but you would be bored and hate it for 10 hours a day because it is not your personality." And he was right. Like, he goes, "You've got to figure out a way of having an open discussion with your boss and talk to your frustrations." And I think it's about going to your boss with open communication and telling them where you're at, not whinging about things, but going, "I add this value. This is what I need. Here's what I'm wanting from the company. Here's how much time I can give this. I'm not expecting you to magic this up tomorrow, but here's what I need." I think just having open discussions with people helps rather than staying frustrated in the moment.
Yeah, that's a really great point to make, and thank you for making it. And there would be, in the main, I think there'd be very few managers or leaders who wouldn't want to know that that's what's going on for you. Like if you're a high performer, even if you're just a really good performer, like if you're solid, and you met your KPIs, your performance reviews are good, you got a pretty, even just a pretty good reputation, or if you're, a super high performer, most managers and leaders will want to know that that's how you feel because they'd rather help you keep progressing and stay with them than
Yes.
walk in on Monday morning to see a resignation letter on their desk, having never had the opportunity. I've had that in our business. I think, oh, how did I not see that? Like, that's on me as the leader. Like, most leaders want to know that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think once you realize that as a professional, that actually you're in a relationship here. It's not all your story. It takes two to tango.
Yep.
It might feel a bit scary, might feel a bit uncomfortable, but actually you're better off for it, aren't you?
Well, I said to my, I remember saying to my all the way through Mindshare, I was like, and WPP, "When I'm ready to leave, you won't be surprised. When I hand in my resignation, it'll be because we've had that many chats about the opportunities and no longer being right for me." And I feel like that's why I got so many great opportunities because I was always open. I never held them over a barrel. I never had a tantrum, but I was always like, "This is what I'm ready for next. Do you think you can find that opportunity in the next 6 months?" And give them time. But I was like, "I promise I will never hand a resignation in that you would be surprised by."
Fast forward though, you find yourself in a boardroom somewhat surprised, as I understand it,
Yeah.
being tapped on the shoulder and being all of a sudden asked to be CEO, which I've read that you didn't see coming, or it wasn't, that wasn't like the CEO role had been advertised and you applied for it. It was a conversation. It was presented to you. Do you want to do it? I'm going to just get you to talk briefly about that moment, but I'd also like to explore this sort of idea that it's really easy to read, particularly when you're early in your career, profiles of people. And yours is such a great story, Katie. You start as an intern, and everything you've said about focusing on the job that's in front of you, getting really good at that, communicating openly, building relationships, and becoming the first female CEO at the company, the only female CEO in the industry in Australia and New Zealand at the time, maybe more broadly than that as well. It's very easy to read that story for young people and go, "Oh well, of course she did. Wonderful." It was probably, yes, that's her, that's her story, and she was ready for it, and she worked towards it, and all of this kind of thing. You were tapped on the shoulder, a little bit surprised and terrified.
Yeah. Yep.
Walk
Absolutely.
us through that.
And well, I was the CEO that was in the company at the time unexpectedly left. He got a great opportunity elsewhere. So it was, all fine in that respect. But there had been no notice that he was going to leave. So my chairman, who had been one of my mentors, basically did tap me on the shoulder and say, "We've all globally decided, my global CEO, everyone was in on it, my regional CEO, you're the person that's going to take this role." And I turned it down. I kept saying, "No, I'm not, like, not me, just I'm fine." And he was like, "You're
Oh,
doing it." I'm
really?
like, Oh, yeah, I turned it down 3 times in the meeting, and he kept saying, "Look, you're doing it." Whilst I had not planned for it, I didn't know. In many ways, I'd been interviewing for it for about 10 years. Without knowing it, I was interviewing for that job through all my actions, through all my training, through all my exposure with clients. So I had been preparing and they had been interviewing me for CEO for that long. I had been, unknowingly to me, written as the succession plan. So a lot of companies had succession plans and we always did. And so I'd been succession plan CEO for a long time. So it was a surprise when it happened, but in hindsight, they'd been preparing me for it. And I did try turning it down. And this is where I think having people that know you well enough and know that it, like, you can do it. I even turned it down that weekend when my boyfriend at the time of 16 weeks, Chris, and he proposed on that weekend. And so I texted that chairman stating, I said, I just got engaged. Give the job to someone else. The story hasn't broken in the Australian yet. No one knows about it. It's been embargoed. Give the job to someone else. I'm going to want to have children. That was what I texted him. He wrote back to me some very choice words. He was like, "You're doing the job. You're the best person for it. We will deal with you having children when you have children. Go and have a drink and enjoy yourself." And tell Chris I said congratulations. So he was wonderful. I tried to back out, and the reason I was scared is that I hadn't seen anyone else do it. You know, they often say you can't be what you can't see. No, I hadn't seen a female in the role at the time I'd gone through, and there'd been no females that had had babies during that tenure either that I'd seen. So I was like, I don't know whether this is possible. And it took a really brave leader in Steady to go, no, no, you're doing it. We will support you through it. And the minute I kind of got my head around it, I was all in and I delivered every year and I wouldn't trade that experience for the world. But I think it's really important that people, when we tell our stories, don't presume everyone's really confident and knows that they're going to do the next thing. I think you have to
No.
have space to go, "Oh, it's okay to feel a bit unsure. And it's okay to feel a bit uneasy. You still go with it. But I don't want people to see my story and go, well, she always knew she was going to be CEO. Everyone knew it for her and she just stepped into it. No, no, I literally turned it down and in text, but, because I just didn't know I could do it.
I was going to ask you, what do you think put you in the position of being asked? You've answered that actually. It was everything you were doing in the decade leading up to it,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to you. But actually with
Yeah.
credit to you as well, because actually what I heard in that story, what pushed you over the line was the strength of the relationships that you had. They had all decided, the chair, the regional CEOs,
Yep.
everyone else in the group above you had already kind of decided for you. All you needed to do was say yes. Ray, you bring up the point about motherhood during your CEO tenure. As a result of all the support you had, I guess another presumption that would be easy in your story to make was, oh, well, she did that and that was easy. And of course, she managed to navigate it well. Do you
Yeah.
think you managed to navigate 3 children and being CEO well? And what did it teach you?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to say I did navigate it well. Actually, I surprised even myself in how well I navigated it. I think though I sacrificed a lot of sleep. I will be honest. I definitely sacrificed a lot of sleep to be doing it all. And I think that even throughout my whole journey, like you said, I've just been focused on wanting to be really good at what I do. And so I kind of knew I could be really good at being a CEO and I knew I was going to be a good mom. And it was just about giving myself the grace to do both of those things well. And I actually learned through my mistakes more than I learned through anything else. And I mean, I love that saying, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I learned a lot throughout my career. And it was actually some of the harder times before I became CEO that prepped me to be CEO and mum. So I had an executive coach and he taught me so much about diary management and boundaries and how to mentally let go of things before I stepped into my home life. I'm very driven by my KPIs and achieving my 360 review. And I thought, what if my husband and my kids had to give me a 360 review every year? Like, what if they had to sit there and say, mum was present, mum was involved? Like, that's the review I care the most about. And so it was just learning to create boundaries so that I could throw myself at both of those things. And I'm, really proud that it was 10 years as CEO and pretty much 8 of those I was a mum for.
Yeah, brilliant. So what would you say to young professionals who are maybe early in their 20s, mid 20s? I mean, I think the average age in Australia and the UK actually is early 30s for first child.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to people thinking about, oh, do I go career or do I do parenthood? What would your advice be now? How should they think about it?
And it's funny, I mentor a lot of women, particularly, and parents, as you said. I love how men are changing the shape of it and taking parental leave. And I think that's an amazing step. But
Brilliant.
tend to mentor a lot of women going through this. And I pass no judgment. I have no judgment on anyone. You want to have children, you don't want to have children. That is entirely up to you. My only piece of advice is if you want to have children, there will never be a perfect time in your career. So do not hold off. I've talked to that many women that will say, I just want to get to the next rung in my career. I just need to I just want to get a bit higher. And I'll think to myself, but you get one step higher, then you want to get another step higher. So I really do passionately say to people, when you want to have babies, have them and work your career around it, because you can, and you absolutely should prioritize your family in a way if that's what you want.
We might wrap up with just one or two more things. You're now helping companies yourself, thinking about the future and strategy and navigating the years and time ahead. I'm interested to know from your perspective, kind of future emerging trends that you see happening now, and if you were back early in your career now, how you would approach it. So what's the trend, and if you're early in your career, how would you approach it?
There are so many trends, but I would go with one. I'd say machine collaboration. So human and machine collaboration, and how machines can augment with humans to collaborate to create something different and bigger and do your job. And if that's the case, my advice to myself back then would have been learning to harness technology in a way that used it for my best advantage, but didn't abdicate my thinking to it. I think it's really, really important. And, I speak a lot with education and with companies building out skills is, the role of critical thinking, judgment, and deductive reasoning. And how do you make sure that as you're learning to use technology that, you've got to get over the fact it's not cheating if you're using it. It's all of those things. How do you use it to make you better, but not to dull your thinking and dumb down what you do, and do not abdicate to the machine, because the machine can hallucinate. It can tell you the wrong thing. But also, how do you make sure you consistently fuel your gut with information so that you can call things out and go, that doesn't feel right. Like my gut doesn't feel right. And so for me, the trend around how machines and people will collaborate to work in the future is huge. Then how do you make sure that you know how to lean into it, how to harness it, but how to keep your wits about you?
Yeah, I really like that. The question shouldn't be in companies, can your people use the tools? I mean, that should be a question, fine. But can your people think with the tools? It's the thinking and the mindset, regardless of the
Yeah.
platform, that is going to really matter. And I actually think young professionals have an advantage, not because they've grown up with technology, like all that kind of standard stuff that you hear about, but actually they're coming into the work. You're at a time coming into the workforce where everyone is early in their career when it comes to AI.
Yep.
It's right now, it's the great leveler. And so you're coming into the workforce without preconceived ideas about how something should be generated or done. As long as you can think and not just use. Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. Final question, thinking back to you being 22-year-old Katie, what would surprise her the most about where you are now?
You know what? I reckon all of it would surprise me and none of it would surprise me. That's the most random question to answer to say to you. I feel like she'd be
Wow.
surprised that I got it all, in the fact that I feel like I have it all. I have an amazing job and a career that I've curated over the years that I've worked hard for. And I've got my family and friends that I love, and I feel like I have that. So she'd be surprised I have it all, but at the same time, not surprised, because I feel like every step I took, I knew I was getting the next thing. And just kind of, I knew that it was working towards something.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for talking.
No problem. Thanks for having me.